Amunye Swaha Sashi Pöge Chukshi Meto Tran Rirabling Shi Nide Gembadi Sangye Shindu Mikte Ulwargi Drugunamda Shingla Che Parasho Yedam Guru Ratna Mindral Kam Niryata Yami Sangye Chedan Soge Chanamla Jancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Soge Chanamla Jancho Pardo Dani Kyapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chonam La Jancho Pardo Dani Kyapsu Dagi Jinso Gibe Sonamki Drola Pinchra Sangye Drupar Sho. Nel Buddha, nel Dharma,
the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. Through the practice of generosity and the other perfections, may I obtain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings.
Namo Yal Hai Keda Ludan Chinke Rubunda Mikenamda Rua Kuinge Ranamachi Tsampa Tamche Keto Dagi Cheten. Buonasera.
Good evening.
Sin da quando
Since when we were little,
abbiamo la
we
tendenza
have the tendency
di guardare
of
fuori
looking outside,
in parte per
partly to
capire meglio noi
understand
stessi.
better
Guardiamo il
ourselves,
mondo fuori
use
di
the
noi
world
come uno
outside
specchio.
us as a mirror.
E uno dei modi in
And
cui
one of the
questo
ways
accade è che noi
in
spesso
which this
cerchiamo
happens is
l'approvazione.
that often we look for approval.
Quindi
So
diamo
we
importanza,
give
in poche
importance,
parole,
in
al
other
modo in
words,
cui
to
il
the
mondo ci
way
vede.
that the world sees
Quindi
us.
da piccolini
So when
facciamo
we're
una
little, we
cosa,
do one thing,
i genitori o chi per
then
loro
the parents
va bene, non va bene,
praise us or
bravo,
not.
non bravo. Cerchiamo questa
We
cosa.
look for
Quando
this thing.
riusciamo ad
And then
avere
when we manage
l'approvazione,
to get the
c'è una
approval,
parte interna che dice
there is an
bene,
inner
sto
part that
sto
says,
facendo,
okay,
va
then
bene.
it's right what I'm doing, it's fine.
E oltre al fatto che questo è qualcosa che
Other
gradualmente, man
than
mano
the
che
fact
andiamo
that
avanti,
this is something that gradually,
certe
as
volte
we go
diventa un po'
on,
ossessiva,
becomes like kind of
il
obsessive,
fatto che
the
facciamo
fact
fatica
that
di
we have a hard
vedere noi
time to see
stessi
ourselves,
se non
if
tramite
not through
il modo in cui gli
the
altri ci
way that the others see
Questo
us.
stanca
And
tantissimo.
this is very tiring.
Perciò questo porta
And
a
so
una ricerca
this brings to a
dell'immagine,
search
di
for
approvazione,
our image of
eccetera, e
approval
molto spesso
and
non è
so
una
on. And very
cosa
often it's
piacevole.
not a pleasant thing.
C'è un insegnamento per me fra uno dei
So
testi
there is a teaching for me that it's among the most important teachings, and it's called the 7 points of the mind training, which is called Lojong in Tibetan. There are various texts about mind training, and one of them is called the 7 points. And one of these points, there is a part where it says we should always follow the two witnesses. The two witnesses are, okay, I should listen to, and they are ourselves and the others. So when the others say something about us, that's a mirror of who we are, and it's right to be able to listen to that, but we should also realize and acknowledge how we see ourselves. So on one hand, there is the part where I listen and I'm open to some criticism, to some approval on the side of the other. And at the same time, I check with myself, is it real or not? Is it coherent or not, what is coming to me? And this is fine. The trick is mostly when we somehow condition our identity and our inner stability of us with ourselves, where we say, okay, I'm fine, what I am, how I am, on the basis that is necessarily on the about the judgment that the others have on us. How many things do we do so that the other thinks something about us? So there is an image, idealized image of ourselves that is how we would like the other to see us. And it's interesting to see, okay, there is still room here in front, you need a little bit of courage, but you can do it for 3 or 4 people. It's a bit like when we were in Mongolia this summer, last summer, and as we got to the first monastery, at a certain point, there was the bus that was totally stuck in the mud because like we were taking a path that also a car would have had a hard time to go through it. So the bus was completely stuck, and so we also went down luckily a bit before that because it was just kind of sliding. And then at a certain point, I just said, okay, let's walk. I had the GPS that would show me how much was missing to get to the monastery, and it was like 24 miles, 24 kilometers, something like that. Did some calculation, okay, like 6 hours walking, but it was like all full of mud everywhere. I just said, okay, let's leave. Somehow we will solve it. And 80 people, we started walking under the stars. It was a very beautiful experience. And with the small cars, they will go back and forth to take us up. And what happened was that I was one of the last ones to get in the car. But then every time that the empty car will come, then it will be, okay, who gets in the car now? No, me, no, me, no, me, no. Okay, who has the courage to face one's own ego to get into the car? Let's go. Anyway, going back to us, I remember this on the fact that, okay, to come in front is not so easy sometimes. Anyway, this is, we are strongly worried about what the others think of us, as if this somehow will determine who we are. So when there is some approval, when there is some criticism, our tendency is to put ourselves either on the defense or on the counterattack. Actually, the most beautiful thing, I use maybe the wrong term, is to not care. There is a text that is part of the 10 teachings of the Kadampa practice. Anyway, there is a point inside of this that says whether the others say that you are a god on earth, that doesn't make you a god, and whether the others say about you that you are like a demon on earth, that doesn't make you a demon. So you shouldn't have attachment neither to those that say that you are a god, neither to those that say that you are a demon. It's quite a work to do, because like if you are in a moment where there is like some recognition, there are like 100 people telling you, wow, you're really great, either physically or virtually, everyone putting likes. At a certain point, there is one at the end of the hall like that, and he says, no, actually, no, and says some criticism. That one person can take away our balance in the moment of joy. He's also free to think whatever he wants. But actually, what happens is that we have this huge attachment to how the others see us, and it seems that what the other thinks or sees us partly determines how we are. And to get free from this without getting to not caring about the view of the other, it's not that. But me, okay, I have to interact with others, and it's right to find a balanced way to interact, because if I want to access to a person, then of course the person needs to see me in a positive way, because otherwise I have a hard time. A person that trusts me and sees me in a positive way, and a person that doesn't trust me and sees me in a negative way, of course I would have much more access to the one that trusts me. So there is nothing wrong in having a good image by itself, but the problem is when we condition our lives, our choices, not on the basis of what we believe that it's sane or not sane, that it's good or bad, but we condition our life on the basis of trying to sustain an idealized image. That actually is also not the image of how we see ourselves, but of how the others see us. And I believe that this is a subject where we all have our part. For me, one of the days where I received a great lesson on this was an event of which I talked about already many times, where I was finding myself in Nepal. I was like a kid, I had maybe like 15, 16 years, around 15. And I was there in Nepal, and a bit I was mocking some friends because she went to the hairdresser and then she didn't like her haircut, but what do you think it changes? Then there were some Italian friends, Western friends, and they went to Kathmandu to the hairdresser. And theoretically, there was the best in town. There was like in a five-star hotel, and okay, I go with you. And I was like, okay, I also need to cut my hair. I just needed to take like the razor and to shave completely without doing anything else. But the point is that at the half of the haircut, the machine broke, and so. But it's not that it was like going on the side; it was just like completely messed up in the halfway of the job, and there was nothing else to do there. And I remember the feeling of going back, going out in the street with the hair all kind of weird, and that feeling of how will the others see me. And there I looked at me and I said, look at you, you're like, first you go to the others and you tell them, what do you think it's your haircut? And then when it's about you, what does it change? And I remember that moment where firstly there was a problem, and then actually I thought, okay, whether one thinks one thing or another, what does it change to me? Nothing. And then I got relaxed. And it was a great freedom, like also a kind of liberation from attention from something that was there. And it's of course okay if I go in a certain context, then I should respect the context, cultural, social, and so on. So I try to adapt. But to me, what the other thinks of how I'm dressed or this and that, I really don't care. I care in the sense of creating an openness in order to be able to access and have a good exchange, because we are made out of preconception. So if we see someone in a certain way, we already have a preconception on that person. So about this, sometimes it could be necessary. Like if one really doesn't care, actually, when there are the people that say, okay, I don't care about my image, but I'm attached to the image of the one that is not that doesn't care about the image, and even that is also an image to which we are attached. So you try to put like a suit. It's a sincere matter about trying to not condition our choices, our mood, and so on, for trying to satisfy an idealized image that we want to pass on to the others. And inside of this, there is this need of approval, this attachment to being seen, approved, recognized. And even sometimes this is also about a sort of need of belonging. So if I'm in a context where everyone, so to speak, like the majority around me, in that context does certain things, has a certain way of thinking, and so on, I try to act in a similar way, to belong, to feel part of that. And one of the things where we need a lot of courage is to go against the current, when one believes that that is right. One needs courage to think in a different way. So when our choices go against the current of our context where we find ourselves, it's not easy. And when we start to get into a spiritual path, the first fundamental point is that of changing our view of the world. There is a change of paradigm. And when we get into that and start to see that, and then we will also get into that quickly, one of the feelings that can arise is that I am not fitting anymore the world in which I was finding myself, because the things to which I was giving importance before, now I don't give importance anymore. I try to make it to make it understand, to make the others understand about that, and it take me like a fool. And how can I do that? And there is like a place where I want to continue to be part of that context, social context, and it's right, I shouldn't get out of it completely, but at the same time I have a hard time, because if I show what I really think, then I am not accepted anymore, I'm not seen, so I kind of try to hide part of that. I have a hard time in the middle of this, and here we need courage. One needs the courage of really allowing us with sincerity to change our vision of the world, our view of the world, without the fear of being judged in a way or another. Easy? No. But that's why we need courage. As we were saying last week, for the easy things you don't need courage. To have courage means that there is like something important, something difficult, but then to get to that goal is of greater benefit, as a greater weight than the difficulty that I have to face, and I know that I can do it. Also because if we want to cultivate a bit deeper relationships in life, we cannot pretend. This takes me back to the sentence that when I was 13 years old, I went in Brazil after having lived in India. My grandma is Hebrew, and she brought me to a rabbi to talk. And this rabbi was quite young, a beautiful person, also wrote some really nice books, a person for which I have a lot of admiration. And the first time that I met him, the concept was like, okay, say something to my nephew, because he wanted to go to live in India, and the point of view of my grandparents was like, okay, okay, to like my father, who was like more than 40 years old, you can do whatever you want, but for him, let him grow up and then he can choose. But then one day, my grandparents invited Lama Gangchen at their house and they offered a beautiful meal. And then at the end, my grandpa told my Lama Gangchen, because I want to thank you because you were the only one that really saw the potential in our nephew. So we thank you for what you taught and transmitted and for the choice that it took. But in that moment, it was quite tense. So okay, my grandma said, "Let's go to the rabbi." And as we got there and we sat, the first thing that he told me, or at least this was the memory that I had before saying hi, how are you, and whatever. Okay, we sat down. He looks at me and says, "If me is me, because you is you, and if you are you, because me is me, I am not me and you're not you." I said, "I agree." But I actually I agreed. I repeat, if me is me, because you are you, and if you are you, because me is me, I am not me and you are not you. That is, if I behave in a certain way because I'm in front of you, then I'm not really me. And the opposite is true also. But if I behave how I behave because that is my way of being and you also do the same, we are sincere, so there can be like a real exchange. So if me is me, because you is you, and you are you because me is me, I am not me and you're not you. But if I am me because me is me and you are you because you are you, then we can talk. When we want to cultivate relationships in the short term, I don't know, I go on the supermarket, I go to pay. Maybe in that moment I am very angry or whatever, and as I'm paying, I try to not really be me because it's a short-term relationship, very short-term. It's when I just pay and that's it. But when I have to cultivate a medium long-term relationship to try to maintain an image to the other of something that I'm not, it's tremendously tiring. Once I was talking about this at length with a meeting with entrepreneurs in Brazil, and at a certain point he says, "Sorry, what you're saying is when one is in the countryside." Okay, no, electoral campaign. When it's like trying to show something, then when the elections have finished, then the real being comes back. You don't need to manifest that image anymore. The truth is that if I try to transmit an image of myself that then is not coherent with what I am, then I will have to do so many things to try to sustain that image. And then when it goes a little bit like, um, okay, then it becomes, we go on with the relationship and I showed that, I have to say, okay, I showed that because I wanted to get approval and this and that, and then it becomes chaotic. When we want to cultivate relationships, like real relationships, then it's important to not have the fear of being oneself. Of course, we need to adapt to the other, but without being fake. And in this process of changing view of the world, that I repeat is something for which we need courage. There is a fundamental principle in the Buddhist view that is the change where usually we live and we come from a social context, cultural context, where we project happiness, the causes of suffering, and so on, in trying to create around us things like a context that is the best and possibly the closest to an idealized image of how things should be. Remembering us that this idealized image, we have inherited this. It's not the right thing. We have inherited how life should be in order to be happy. And there is like cultural, social, of tremendous influence from all the various passages that society has gone through from the Industrial Revolution and so on. I remember if I talked about this in a Bagnano or here, sometimes about this man that I go to meet, and I was in this small village recently, this in the south of Senegal, and I find this small village very simple, poor, but I didn't see like people hungry, like, and I see these coconut trees. No one is drinking the coconut water, no one is eating coconuts, and I really like coconuts. And I was like, what about coconuts? No, we don't eat it. But okay, I saw that they can climb. They can quickly go on the palm trees. They take some liquid that goes out of the palms, and they make like a wine of palms. That's a drink that they drink a lot there. It's not that they cannot climb trees. Why don't you eat coconuts? No, it's too much work to go there to take it. And look, other than the water, you can eat the coconut, you can make oil that is very good. You can make with the fiber of the coconut, you can make a lot of things. And there were like hundreds of coconut trees just left there like that. And when I asked about this, then at the end, this man told me, but actually, you know, once that you have eaten, what do you want more than that? The first impact for us is like, okay, like poor people, you have so many resources and you don't use them in the proper way. For example, they have thousands of mango trees, but when the time of mango comes in the summer, they said here in the village, a person if eats like one mango in a year is a lot because there are like so many we don't eat. It just falls on the ground and then becomes like nourishment for the ground or for the birds. And we were like, okay, you don't eat it, but let's collect it. Let's dry it so we can sell it and these kind of things. How much do we dedicate to produce more than what our needs are? This is part of our culture. Where does this come from? In the pre-industrial times, was there this attitude? I don't remember, but I don't know. In the sense that I imagine that if we go back to the villages of 150 or 200 years ago, I don't believe that people had the attitude of like checking where there were opportunities to create like an economical growth and these kind of things. We live inside our view. I'm not judging like good or bad. I'm just saying like, we live inside of a view of a world where I have to um, use all the resources that are there to produce more than what I need in order to get more things and so on. And I could say yes, but if I'm able to have more money, then I can buy like a better boat. Since I live in a place where I need like the boat to get closer instead of getting the generator, we get like a better generator. We change the batteries and like many things. But in our way of living, how much is life consumed in this process? And on the other hand, you see them, they have eaten, okay, and they're happy, eh? Everything is good, I've eaten, what do I want more out of life? There is more satisfaction in that sense. And then everything, okay, as like the good size and bad size, not about here, okay, saying what's best, but to show how there is like a part of a view of word that is that we inherit just as we have inherited ours. When you go to like a place where there is a very different culture, they inherited that. So what happens is that we leave the word and we grow inside of a certain view that it was created by us. We mostly inherit that. And this view in which we have grown up as a fundamental component, that is that if you want to be well, to be happy, in order to not suffer, then you should manage to get to these goals that are about the prince and the princess, the soulmate, the perfect husband. I think, okay, this is already a bit like gone down. We don't have that view of the world so much, like until one generation ago. Maybe it was a bit more. Where we have the illusion, okay, a good job, okay, the career. We have the view of, okay, in order for me to be happy, I should have like a nice house, a certain economical situation, the family should be in a certain way, physically I should be in a certain way, aesthetically I should be in a certain way. We have different points in our image of happiness, or at least in the idealized image of what is necessary in order to be happy. And we project predominantly this in the world around us, in the external conditions. The view the Buddha brings us to us is there is also there an idealized image of happiness. But it's not that, it doesn't depend on external conditions, but from internal conditions. And when I give priority to this in front of the other view, they are opposite. And the truth is that you have a really hard time to leave the two together, because at the beginning, okay, you're doing a bit here, a bit there, but you need a lot of courage to really change by all means the view. And to help us in this process, there is a part of the Buddhist teachings that's more than like a teaching that you should listen to once and to understand and something like that. It's something that actually in the path that Buddha transmitted to us, we should theoretically reflect on at least once a day. And these are called the Four Noble Truths. As I've often said, often translations are a bit like not very precise. When we say the Four Noble Truths, sometimes it can pass the idea of like four things that are superior because they're noble and that they are the truth and the rest is not right. And here it's not about this, it's not about, okay, Buddhism saying, okay, I am the owner of the truth. The word truth also, maybe a better word would be like reality, because it's noble. Actually, noble in Tibetan is pakpa, and there is the translation of the Sanskrit Arya. Arya, by Arya we mean inside of the Buddhist context, the Aryas are the Harats, are two similar terms used, refer to those that have managed to get to a state of harmony and peace, so that they have not anger, fear, envy, attachment, and so on. They don't have like a mental state of suffering, having eliminated completely one's own ignorance. So they live in a state of love towards oneself, towards the others, of altruism, of harmony, of coherence. They have realized what is called the correct view of reality, eliminating the various mental defilements. A being that has reached this state is called an Harat or an Arya, which was an ancient term in Sanskrit that means like a superior being. And from here, if we check, okay, the same context used in a completely different context, like the Aryans in the Nazism, like superior beings, actually is the same root, but in a totally different context. The superior being means one who has realized, developed inner qualities. So noble is a translation of the term Arya. That means those that have reached a state of balance and of wisdom. The truth is not about like truth and the lies, but it's about like about the reality. How is it that one has reached that state, sees the world? What is his view of the world? What is the paradigm? So if we wanted to translate in a way that is a bit like commented, instead of saying the Four Noble Truths, we will say the four fundamental aspects of life, how they are seen by a being that has gone out of the cycle of suffering, or that has eliminated one's own ignorance and selfishness and so on. And so it's something that Buddha, having reached that state, shares with the others his view of the world about four fundamental questions. And these questions are questions to which we, all of us, have already an answer, even if we have never formally asked ourselves the question. And these questions condition our life strongly. The difficulty that it's there is that to go through this question again and to find a new answer, the new answer shouldn't be found on a conceptual level only. It should replace the previous one. Because the danger is that, okay, conceptually, I find myself a new answer, but on a conceptual level, I'm still following the one that I did before. So, before getting to dive into the Four Noble Truths, or we start by looking at the four childish truths. I would rather say, okay, immature, because like, okay, childs often are very mature, so like to say childish is not very right, and that is kind of like how we see. So the four fundamental questions are, and I repeat, these questions are questions to which we have already all given answers, even if we never formally asked ourselves the question that condition our lives. The first question is, what do I want to avoid? What is suffering? What is there in my life that by all means I don't want? What is it that I want to push away? The second question, what I want to avoid, the so-called suffering, where does it come from? Why do I suffer? A third question, is it possible or not to be happy, or better, where do I project my happiness? And fourth question, what do I do in order to be happy and not suffer? So, what is suffering? What do I not want? Why do I suffer? What is happiness and where do I project it? And what to do in order to be happy and not suffer? The ideal process here is that each one goes through a sincere, deep process to check where one projects suffering. Where do you actually see that are the causes of suffering? Where does one project happiness, and what does one do for that? What helps us is that we're very similar. It's true that each one is an individual, different, and so on, but we maybe have like what 0.1 that is different for the rest. Like, okay, I never like made right calculation, but that's to say, okay, we have so many similar aspects, and so generalizing, there are four ways to answer these questions. First of all, what is suffering? Predominantly for us, what we see as suffering is divided into two types: the physical suffering and mental suffering. Physical suffering is easy: heat, cold, hunger, thirst, pain, and so forth. Mental suffering, anxiety, dissatisfaction, fear, rancor, inner states of negative inner states of mind. So anytime that we have the feeling of like feeling bad, then we believe that that's what we want to push away by all means. And if we check, the majority of our lives is about looking for pleasures and avoiding suffering. So mostly it's about that, what we want to avoid: the physical suffering and the mental suffering. That's it. Because if one will put us in front of the following possibilities, what do you want? Like a long, difficult path in order to get to the state of Buddhahood, or an immediate state of well-being without any type of suffering? What would you choose? The doubt, in the meanwhile, I choose the second one. Then maybe after that there is always time to go towards the state of Buddhahood. In the meanwhile, let's try to be well. So a bit jokingly, what do we want? Like a comfortable samsara, or a safe, a secure path to get out of the cycle of suffering? The answer, sincere answer, very often is a comfortable samsara. But this is the common view that we have. Why do we suffer? When we suffer, usually, do we point the finger towards someone or something or not? It's very interesting to see that when we have whatever inner feeling, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, one of the first things that we do is to ask ourselves why, to look for the reason. We look in the world outside a coherence with what we feel inside. And so, when we have a moment of joy, of happiness, of well-being, of pleasure, or a moment of sadness, rancor, fear, of whether both in on the good side and the bad side, we don't simply sit there. We try to understand why. When we try to understand why, where do we look for this? Inside or outside? Predominantly, we look outside. So usually we could say, we could kind of sum it up that according to us we suffer for three reasons. We believe predominantly that we suffer because we are not able to get what we want. And by this we mean, okay, it's not that I wanted a new car, I cannot have it. But it's much more subtle. Like, I project how reality should be, how the other should behave, how things should be and are not according to how I believe that they should be. Very often we suffer much more because things are not how we think they should be rather than for how they actually are. Because that situation like that, without the expectation of how it should be, it would all be fun actually. But because it's not how I think it should be, then it's already a problem. So the first reason for which we believe that we suffer is that we cannot have what we want. The second reason for which we believe that we suffer is that we need to leave situations that we don't like. So it's not because I cannot have what I want, but it's because that thing is like that, the other thing is like that, because I don't like this, and the other thing is difficult, and so on. Third cause for which we think that we suffer is because we have to separate from the things that we like. Places, situations, objects, people. So if for an instant we allow ourselves to dream freely, and I ask you, allow yourself to imagine, would you be happy if you could have everything that you want? If you can be free from everything that you don't want, and if this could last forever, would you be happy or not? Me, yes. And this, I open and close a parenthesis, is the heaven, the view of the heaven. Very often, that's like a place where you have all the good side, you don't have the bad side, and it lasts forever. But the problem is that what if I am born again in the heaven, and also the neighbor or the person that I am in conflict with is also reborn in heaven? Have you ever imagined what will happen that you get there and there is the same dynamic that repeats itself? Oh, we're still here. And that's also forever. So, but anyway, aside from this starts from a principle where we believe that if we can have whatever we want, if we can be free from what we don't want, and if this could last forever, so we don't have to separate from what we like, then we would be happy. That's really not working. One of the biggest lies that I've ever been there. I don't know who started with this, where this projection of ours is born from, but we know that it's not like that. We just need to analyze it quickly. But even before that, by suffering we mean feelings predominantly that are born, arise from the body or from mental states. By causes we predominantly mean because we cannot have it what we want, because we have to separate from what we don't want. And consequently, where do we project happiness? In having what I want and to avoid what I don't want, and to keep what I like. If I'm able to have what I want, and by this we mean people, situations, and so on, and I am able to avoid what I don't like, and I'm able to keep this situation, then I will be happy. And the fourth question, what do we do then to be happy and not suffer? We spend our lives in this sort of crazy run. It comes to my mind, it always comes to my mind when I talk about this, the image of a cartoon that I looked at as a child, that I watched, was like crazy run in Italian, with some strange vehicles that they were all running, and but it's as if they did it on purpose to lose actually. And what happens is that we spend our lives to do whatever we can to have what we want, and to avoid what we don't want, and to keep what we like, but without really succeeding in that. Let's analyze this a little bit. First of all, is it possible to have everything that I want? Let's say, okay, like a person that wants little actually. Okay, I want little. I don't want like big things. Am I able at a certain point to get the things that I want? Absolutely, yes. But there is a scam. What is the nature of desire? The more I have, and the more I want. So once that I get those things, that I'm happy, and then after a while I start to get back that inner feeling that I have something lacking, I am dissatisfied, and why I'm asking myself, okay, why do I feel this? Okay, because I'm lacking something, and so the car is not enough. I also need a boat, or this model of car is not fine anymore because there is the other one, or I don't know, whatever else. Anyone comes up with 1,000 things. So what happens is that the more I have, the more I want. The rule continues: the more I want, the less I have, because how much I have is not an objective fact; it's a subjective fact. So if I want like 1,000,000 and I'm able to obtain 1,000, the 1,000 that I have, is it a lot or little? It's little because I want 1,000,000. But if what I want is 100, I'm able to get 1,000. What I have is a lot. And if what I want is 1,000 and what I have is 1,000, then what I have is kind of right. So what happens is that little or much is a subjective fact on a basis of a comparison. So if I receive much time or little time, a lot of affection, little affection, if I'm able to get, I don't know, a lot of recognition or little recognition, if I have something, it depends on what is our point of reference. So the more that I have, the more I want, and the more I want, and the less I have. And this reminds me, for example, of the story of the socks of Lakpala. And here there is a very important lesson. The story, he was one of the most important masters for me, even if formally he gave me teachings only once, but I've lived with him for many years. He was like a father partly, and in daily life he taught me so many things. And this time I came back from a journey from Italy and wanted to bring him some presents, and I took him some socks, some good socks, purple in color, and he was working a lot. He was waking up at 3 in the morning, doing 3 hours of meditation. Then he would have breakfast, and he would work. He worked like in the construction, administration, and he worked in a lot of different sectors. and I brought him these socks, and I gave them to him, and he receives them, and he looks at them, and he likes to joke a bit, and he was like, "What do I do with this?" I said, "Okay, Gala, let's look at something. Okay, like shoes, feet, socks. Do you see like a relationship?" And he looks at me like, "But I already have 2 pairs of socks, like 2." And he shows me. He points a finger. Okay, see, like at the entrance of the room, there were like the shoes, and then with the socks. Those are the ones that I'm using now. Then he lifts the carpet that is like on the bed, because that's in the culture you do that, Tibetan culture you do that. And these is the other pair of clean socks. So I use one and clean the other, and it's enough like this. And I started to explain, yeah, but these socks that you have are of a really bad material, acrylic. These actually are natural. The elastic of your socks is worn out. He was like using an elastic from paper, and he will always have like a mark on the legs. Then he started to explain. I started to explain all the possible reasons for which my socks were the best. And then he smiles at me at a certain point, and he says thank you, and he receives the gift that I gave him. And after like a couple of days, I see some other people with the socks that I gave him. What was the basis of reasoning of Lakpala? If 2 pairs of socks are enough, and if I am fine with the pair of socks that I have, if I get a third pair, then 5 will not be enough, and also 10. Because when I'm able to determine what is my need, and I'm happy with my need, and I'm satisfied, the more I have, the more I want, and the more I want, the less I have. And the key here is to be able to understand what is one's own need, and to be satisfied when the needs are met. Because otherwise it starts like, okay, I think, okay, for me, okay, in India, okay, 2 pairs of socks will be enough. Here, if I think about me, I need like 6, because 2 like for summer, 2 for like mid-season, and 2 for winter. But at the end, we have like I have like two drawers of socks. Then every time that I need them, I never find the right ones. I never understood this thing about socks. I have them all of the same color, so it's even more difficult. But where do they end up? I don't know if it has ever happened to you. I don't know if there is like a spirit that takes the socks, or what happens there. Anyway, when you have 2 pairs, then you don't have this problem. What happens is that when I don't know how to set a limit to my need, I'm not able to recognize my real need, and I give room to what I want. The more I have, and the more I want. The more I want, and the less I have. So the first goal, to have what I want, is infinite. Because then we also change our mind. So what I liked before, now I don't like it anymore. So we cannot base our satisfaction in obtaining more. And let's remember that satisfaction, that is one of the keys for happiness, is not the result of getting what we want. Satisfaction is the result of giving value to what we have. I repeat, because this is important. Satisfaction is not obtained by managing to obtain what we want, is not the result of getting what we want. Satisfaction is the result of giving value to what we have. And there is also this way of saying poor is that was satisfied, and the rich one is that which is not satisfied. But satisfaction is to be able to give value to what I want on a human level, material level, and so on. So the first point, to be able to get what I want, that is not just about material things, but also people, how they behave, how they should be, because we have an idealized image of people that are around us or not. Think about your family, about work, and take just like two random people. You have like an idealized image of how you think that that person should be, and they should be better if it was like that, and so on. Yeah, we do. And then one does anything possible to change the other, and of course that's a complete failure, but one tries because no one can change anyone. We can interact and help the other in a process of change, but no one can change the other. And anyway, the more I have, the more I want, and then it's never enough. And I have my own theory also of this thing. The more I have, the more I want. When we want something, it's my own theorem. It could be right or wrong. When we want something, actually, what do we want? The object or the feeling of pleasure that we have when we are able to receive the object? It's more about the feeling of pleasure, right? We this projection of the happiness on what I want actually is very much connected in projecting happiness in an inner feeling that is connected with dopamine. Dopamine is much more connected with getting, obtaining, with the pleasure, the pleasure of the senses, eating, sex, buying, the getting, the conquest. This is very much connected with dopamine. The, the process of dopamine has a very interesting characteristic and a very interesting, very important function. One of these, as I understood, is that of generating the wish for something. So if it was unpleasurable to eat and it wouldn't generate hunger wouldn't generate suffering, then we would already all be dead, because it's tiring to get to work to in order to get food, to cook, to clean, to digest. There is a whole work around that. There is not little. Imagine how much more simple the world would be if we didn't have to eat. But what happens is that because why do we put so much effort into eating? Because it's pleasurable. But the higher the peak of pleasure, then also the lower the fall after that. After the pleasure, we don't stay like um, in a long wake of that pleasure. After a while, there is like some kind of void that is manifested, and that void brings us to the fact that okay, I want to repeat that experience. I need to feel that void, and so because I had that by eating in that way, then I go to the same place or I look for a similar restaurant. Okay, I like mozzarella, I go eat some mozzarella, and so on. We project happiness on the various things. This this mechanism of reward, where we look for things, is fundamental for life, for our own survival. And dopamine is directly connected with this. Pleasure then brings us to that void that then makes us put energy, effort into repeating that thing. And this is one of the important aspects of our life. And so, if we check the nature of pleasure connected with dopamine is dissatisfaction. Because the higher the peak, then the deeper the fall. And so that theoretically I can put even more effort to obtain that thing, to even give more importance to that thing. And here there is an interesting point in the middle of all of this. Have you ever had the experience of like doing something that is very pleasurable, and then at a certain point that same experience that is repeated is not able to generate the same state of pleasure, and one somehow needs to increment the intensity of that experience. One explanation that I received once is that our brain, our being in every aspect is constantly looking for balance. We look the more that we can to be in a state of balance when we have an experience that is too strong of dopamine, like a kind of a stimulation that is too strong. Our brain somehow says, okay, there is too much dopamine, this is not good. And so it does two things. One, it hides the receptors of dopamine. And so when I repeat that experience, there are less receptors. So I need to increase the experience, the stimulation, in order to have a similar feeling of pleasure. And the other thing that comes with that is that when we have a stimulation that is too strong, what is the opposite of pleasure? Let's say the feeling of void, the feeling of lackness. And so when we have a state of too much pleasure, the body naturally tries to find balance again. So it generates a state where we're not well. And this creates a vicious cycle. And so the more I have, the more I want, is because like what I have is pleasure. So I am looking for pleasure, for dopamine. And speaking in these terms, we can talk about happiness in many ways, but to simplify, we could say, okay, like 3 different types of happiness. Let's imagine the inner feeling that it's there when we obtain something that we want. Materially, we're able to have like the attention of someone that we want. We're able to have like sensorial pleasures, like from food to sex, or listening to some good music, or obtaining something like money, recognition of image. Are we able to connect with that inner feeling? It's also pleasant. Then now imagine the pleasant inner feeling that is there when you help someone. When you're able to connect with a place of love, of generosity, there you're able to connect with the other and to help the other. That somehow is also connected. Okay, let's also imagine the feeling when it's all fine, when there is that joy in the simple things. And now let's also imagine the inner feeling when we look at ourselves in the eyes, at each other in the eyes, when we caress also our dog or the turtle, whatever. When there is an exchange of affection, the feeling of pleasure, is it like a peak that then goes down, or is it like a longer thing that remains? A longer thing that remains. The feeling of pleasure that we have when there is an exchange of affection is much more connected with oxytocin rather than dopamine. It's a third type, another type of physical reality of neurotransmitters, hormones, and so on. But that is much better for us. The problem of the more I have, the more I want, is that we project this in, okay, the more dopamine I have, the more dopamine I want. It works like that. So the rule of, in order to be happy, I need to have what I want, starts by a wrong basis of projecting happiness in having and not in being and not in sharing. When we offer to someone, and that feeling of being happy with the simple things of life is much more connected with serotonin, that is more connected with satisfaction, rather than with the pleasure of having and obtaining and of the conquest.